Hi, I'm Manuel from the Codesphere team, and I'm excited to show you a new alpha feature of Codesphere, running virtual machines natively in Codesphere. We built this feature to simplify the migration of legacy monolithic applications that may require virtual machines to run into a more modern microservices architecture. We achieve this by allowing you to run both virtual machines and microservices next to each other right in Codesphere. This slide shows how a Codesphere deployment compares to a purely virtualized hardware stack. The lowest layer is always bare metal machines running in some basement, right? And on the left-hand side, you install a host OS on the bare metal machines, where you would then run some hypervisor, for example, VMware. If you wanted to add a containerized infrastructure, you would need to add a container runtime and care for a container orchestration. Until then, the application developers can build applications and figure out how to deploy them to the container orchestrator. Each of those layers typically requires a very distinct skill set. So often, for example, you will find a dedicated team managing virtual machines and also a different dedicated team managing Kubernetes clusters on top of those virtual machines. And then there is probably a different team caring for how applications will go from development to production and get deployed to those Kubernetes clusters. Codesphere tries to simplify that operational burden by bundling the container orchestration and the application platform into a single product. And that platform can then be used as a development platform as well as for running production workloads. The deployment model introduced by Codesphere for that is the so-called workspace. Workspaces are what makes up a cloud-native environment in Codesphere, so it can bundle one or multiple microservices that will then end up being run as pods in a Kubernetes clusters. So at the end of the day, you will have containers running on a node. Customers like the simple way of getting started with building things in Codesphere, and that's not only because that's in general very easy to use. You don't need to figure out which base image to use, you don't need to build your own Docker file to get started, and you don't need to figure out how to install your application with Helm on Kubernetes. We also have customers who actually use Codesphere for decomposing monolithic applications by building new functionality inside Codesphere workspaces while keeping the monolithic application running in the old Windows virtual machine. When they add new functionality, they end up being implemented in workspaces, and then traffic is routed instead of to the monolith when the service is ready to the microservice. They also work on migrating functionality bit by bit from the monolithic application into a microservice. And that allows them to gradually migrate away from the monolithic application to a full microservice architecture. This new alpha feature now allows to make this migration even more seamless by allowing you to run the virtual machine directly inside Codesphere, and you manage the virtual machine in the same way as you manage a workspace. That allows to route the traffic dynamically between a virtual machine and the workspace, and the traffic between services and the monolith doesn't even leave the Kubernetes network. Okay, so now for the live demo. On this screen, you see the management of virtual machines in Codesphere. You can see that we already have two different VMs created, one that is running a Ubuntu, and the other one is running actually a Windows VM. To manage or to add a new VM to your Codesphere instance, you would start by uploading a new image, and you can see that we already have these two images for the virtual machines, and I can hit this button to update a new virtual machine image. For example, I could give it a name here and call it my blog, and then I would select the virtual machine image from my local device and select an image format here. Codesphere supports all different kinds of formats, including VMDK, which is the format typically used by VMware virtual machines. I will then upload the image here, and later on I can create a virtual machine using that image. I skip the upload now since we already have images uploaded, and watching a file upload is not the best spent time, right? So let me create a new virtual machine. I will call it blog here, select the disk interface, and then I will need to enter the credentials for accessing the virtual machine in the remote desktop later on. So the user we use is the admin user, and I'll paste the password here. I select the big enough plan for running a Windows virtual machine, and then hit create, and then you can see in the background that the virtual machine is being created. It will now take some time for the virtual machine to boot up, because this is actually virtual machine booting, right? And in the meantime, I will show you how to route traffic to that new virtual machine. So in this screen, you typically manage how traffic to your own domains is routed to a specific workspace inside Codesphere. And in addition to selecting which workspace you want to route the traffic to, you can now also select which virtual machine you want to route it to. So in the routing settings here, you can see that for the slash path on this domain already, we route the traffic to one of the existing virtual machines. And I will add a new path here now to route traffic to /blog, because we are hosting a blog on our Windows virtual machine. I will route the traffic to /blog to our newly created virtual machine, which is called blog, right? So let me hit save, and that will redirect the traffic to that new virtual machine once the virtual machine is booted and ready. Okay, so now let's get back to the VM screen and see if our Windows VM has finally booted. To open the remote desktop, I click on the remote desktop icon here, and then it will open in a new browser window, connect to the Windows VM, and show up the desktop and the browser with the block already opened. So this is the application that we want to run and also access externally. So this is just a small block here. And to see if that works, I will now open the domain in a browser on my own machine instead of inside the virtual machine. Okay, so back to Codesphere. Let me go to the domains page to copy the domain name here. Open it up in a new tab, the /blog path that we routed the traffic to the new blog, right? And you can see the blog is showing up here. So now to kind of prove that this is actually the blog running in the virtual machine, let me create a new blog post inside the VM and then see if it pops up when we access the blog from the outside. So let's go to the admin interface, create a new blog post. We'll call it Hello World. We hit publish and then go back to the other tab. Refresh, and you can see the new blog post is showing up. So this shows how easy it is to use an existing virtual machine and just upload it to Codesphere, run it on Codesphere, and route traffic to specific paths to your virtual machine while you route traffic to other paths to your existing workspaces on Codesphere. Thanks for watching.